Some big development is increasingly likely in the Gulf, and now is the time to prepare. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to talk to you about today. We have a lot more model runs. We have some more things going on in the East Pacific we will briefly be touching upon, but the main focus for this video is going to be for the Gulf region because, number one, the East Pac stuff is going to potentially carry over, and it's best if we lump it all at once. And number two, we have more data to look at, and I want to go ahead and dive right into this as soon as possible and give the best comprehensive look I can to give you all the information you need from this. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off from the National Hurricane Center, we have Tropical Storm Amanda, we have Invest 91E, and we have this area of interest over here off the coast of Central America. So we're going to briefly touch upon these as well as look at the ensembles right afterward, and we'll go ahead and get started with Invest 91E right here. A broad area of low pressure located a few hundred miles southwest of that region in Mexico is producing a large area of showers and thunderstorms. Environmental conditions appear conducive for development of the system, and a tropical depression is likely to form late this weekend or early next week. This disturbance is forecast to move northeastward and then northward near the coast of southern Mexico. Interests in southern Mexico should monitor the progress of the system regardless of development. Locally heavy rainfall is possible across portions of southern Mexico through early next week. 50% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days. So we have that going on right there, and we definitely need to pay attention to this because this is moving first to the east, and then it's going to pivot to the north and potentially impact up to millions of people with whether it's locally heavy rainfall or even some potential winds and a landfall as well. Those are all possibilities with this, and we're going to go ahead and move on to this area of interest and talk about that very briefly. A trough of low pressure offshore of Central America is producing disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity. Environmental conditions appear conducive for gradual development of the system, and a tropical depression could form later this weekend or early next week if the system remains offshore. The low is forecast to move slowly northward towards the coast of Central America. Regardless of development, locally heavy rainfall is possible across portions of Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. 30% chance in the next 48 hours, 60% in the next 7 days. So that's the situation that we are seeing and paying attention to for you guys right there. And depending on what happens with these two areas of interest could cause a bit of carryover effect and lead to our first system in the Atlantic for this year. And we can go ahead and start with the ensembles to show you that. This is 4 days out for you guys. This is our area of interest over here off the coast of Mexico. That's going to be moving to the east and then towards the north as well. Definitely paying attention to that for sure. Definitely quite a bit of power associated with it as well. 983, 982, like pressures in the 980s and a few 970s are in there interlinked as well. So definitely something to pay attention to and something to kind of take seriously for those tuning in from this region of Mexico right here, and especially the Gulf of Tehuantepec as well. Definitely going to want to watch out for that. And even the first 4 days, things are going to ramp up and things are going to continue to get only intensify from there once this system does inevitably and most likely develop. So that's what we have for right there. Let's go ahead and shift out a day. So this will be for Wednesday right here. Wednesday, you have the system starting to get moved either to the north or to the west and either hug the coast or make landfall and potentially move through Mexico right here. It's also the area in Central America that I'm paying attention to that will start to slowly get its act together as well, going to 6 days out. So this will be for Thursday, seeing more low pressure systems starting to get their act together. Looking at a potential scenario where this system actually heads further to the west, remains around tropical storm strength, and then makes landfall near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And from that point on is when our carryover effect will start to impact the Gulf region right here. And even in parts of the Caribbean Sea, we're seeing some ensembles starting to reflect that as well. Going to 8 days out, so this will be for next Saturday, that carryover effect from one or both of these areas of interest definitely starts to take shape across parts of the Caribbean and in the Gulf. You're looking at potential scenario right here. We have a kind of an outlier of a 982 millibar ensemble potentially reaching hurricane strength, making landfall in Florida. That's an outlier. The main models are further to the west near the Bay of, not the Bay, but rather the Gulf region, and further up the coast off the Yucatan. So you're looking at this 1001, 1000, 1001, 1003, 985. Definitely some ensembles with power, a little bit of power for sure as well. The question is, how many more are we going to see by the next day? And by the next day, definitely seeing a lot more concentrated over here in the central part of the Gulf, 996, 989. Definitely a bit of an uptick compared to what we've seen previously in previous days as well. We're going to want to pay attention to this. We're going to want to take this rather seriously as more data and more information continue to come in. And then as we go ahead and go to 10 days out for the European, things continue to ramp up, looking at potential Gulf impacts as well. I will say, though, these ensembles, despite having a low pressure with them, definitely appear to me like they are going to be at least relatively weak wind speed wise and rather disorganized. I would say the 972 millibar isn't even at hurricane strength. It's mainly at tropical storm strength from what I'm noticing. Same with the 987. It does strengthen off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, but it remains around 50 to 60 miles per hour or so as it approaches Florida. So that's definitely something we're paying attention to. It looks to me that it's going to be developing, but it's going to be somewhat disorganized according to the European. So that's definitely something we're watching out for. Also want to take a look at our GFS ensembles as well. GFS ensembles are a bit more all over the place from what I'm noticing. Even going to 6 days out, you have the main majority of them kind of hugging the Bay of Campeche over here from that carryover effect from Invest 91E, kind of just hugging that coast right there, not really moving around too much. And then as we go ahead and go to 8 days out over here, definitely noticing a few more ensembles popping up here and there. It's mainly the European that's been kind of leading the charge with this tropical development, and it's definitely something that I've been kind of curious about as well. So that's what we got for that, and then we'll go ahead and go to 9 days out as well. 9 days out, definitely seeing some more ensembles. It's a bit more scattered and all over the place than the European. European's more concentrated, so it kind of depends on whether it's the GFS that's going to win out or the European that wins out, it seems. And for right now, it looks like the European has remained pretty consistent, while the GFS has kind of remained a bit more all over the place. So that's definitely a curious tidbit as well. And then lastly, let's go ahead and go to 10 days out. 10 days out, still all over the place in the Gulf region. I also want to check the FNV3 as well. FNV3... from what I'm seeing, definitely isn't showing as much activity, but it's also not showing as much activity in the East Pacific as well. And the hurricane models are definitely kind of more active over in this region for sure. Same as the European. And then the GENC. Let's take a look at our Canadian ensembles. Canadian ensembles are even picking up on this, curiously enough. They are picking up on 1004, 1004. So there's a little bit of pop with this signal that I'm noticing in the Gulf. So those are ensemble runs that we have for you right there. At least all four of them are showing a little bit of something from this. The Canadian's a bit more on the conservative side. The FNV3 is on the conservative side. The GFS is a bit more all over the place, where the European is actually the one leading the charge, which typically with the European, it's the most conservative and the most accurate model of the main models that we have access to. So that is a bit of a shocker right there. But ultimately, we can go ahead and shift over once again, and let's go ahead and pull up our operational runs. Here is our operational models for you right here. So here's what we got for you guys today. And this is what we got. There's not going to see too much in the next couple of days. It doesn't start ramping up in the EPAC and in the Atlantic until about 4 days out is when we start seeing our first round of activity from Invest 91E, remaining relatively large and broad compared to what we've seen in the earlier runs. As well. We're looking at about 1,004 millibars as well. So overall, this does appear to be around tropical storm strength as the system approaches Mexico. That's still going to bring impacts regardless of intensity, in my opinion. It's going to be making landfall in that region as well, and then kind of moving through Mexico too. And then you start noticing, at least from what I'm seeing right here, at least with the Central American low that's kind of been designated by the NHC, it looks like it doesn't necessarily develop too much and then enters into El Salvador, Honduras before moving through Central America and emerging either in the Caribbean or in the Bay of Campeche. It's definitely been a bit more disagreement, but at least according to what I'm seeing right here, it does emerge in the Caribbean for sure, compared to what the GFS has been forecasting. But European has the system kind of remaining relatively disorganized as it moves through the Gulf right here. Around by the time we get to June 12th, you have the system mainly being lopsided to the east right here as it starts to organize and potentially develop as well. It remains a very broad low pressure system as well. So if this does develop, it's going to remain relatively weak for the most part. But that's kind of what we're looking at for right there. 1,003, 1,004 millibars by the time you are across parts of by the time it's in the Western Gulf as well. I will say, though, there is an interesting tidbit with the collapse in the steering currents with this that I'd find kind of curious. Not necessarily seeing too much. I'm not sure if I think there's actually a high pressure system that might be blocking it from really moving anywhere, whether it's further to the west, whether it's further up north for right there, and then eventually making its way up to the north and potentially making landfall in Louisiana. But by the time this does a whole play out, and that's the time the system does make landfall, it's June 17th. That's 13 days out, according to this model. So overall, that's not necessarily the best scenario, and the European definitely, especially as it goes further out, is a bit more unrealistic as well. Although it's not nearly as bad as the GFS on an average day, but ultimately, you are seeing the confidence continuing to increase. Although with that confidence shows a broad area of circulation and a relatively weak system overall. Just out of my own curiosity, what's the shear and what's the dry air going to be like? Let's take a quick look based on what we have for the European. Here is our European wind shear driven system right here. Wind shear across parts of the Gulf right here. It definitely starts to have a bit of a trough that moves through that brings some wind shear into the region as the system first emerges in the Caribbean Sea. And then as time continues to go on, you do see a wind shear pocket, actually a pretty large one, pop up across parts of the Gulf. And then as the system starts to get its act together, you also are noticing this jet as well further to the north of it too. It's going to be a curious case. I think right now it's going to remain relatively lopsided to the right. And then as time goes on and as that wind shear pocket continues to increase according to the European, even at 204 hours out, so this is June 13th, that morning, you're definitely seeing that wind shear pocket kind of expand further and further and allow for the system to get its act together. And it's definitely something that I find kind of interesting. I've always found that the Gulf and the Western Caribbean is more so the wild card because the wind shear just goes up and down, up and down, up and down, mainly due to the troughs and the ridges as well as the highs and the low pressure systems from the severe weather season going on in the United States, which definitely influences tropics early on, and it looks like it's going to be influencing the tropics for this scenario. But as time continues to go on, the wind shear remains relatively strong just outside of the circulation, but as long as this bulk of shear stays away from the center of it, then this should have no issue theoretically developing, although because of how large and how broad this system is, it's ultimately not going to be super strong. It's going to probably be another Alberto from 2024. Very low pressure, but it was a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm, mainly because of its size. because the basically pressure does not necessarily indicate the amount of wind speed. Are those pressure gradients expanding? How strong is that pressure gradient, and how far is it, pretty much? And that's kind of the other factor into tropical cyclones, and just looking at low pressure systems and taking them at face value. So that's what we're looking at for our shear. It remains to the north of the Gulf region over here until it makes landfall potentially in Florida by the time this scenario starts to play out. So that's the situation that we got for you guys right there for the European. Let's take a look at our moisture component as well. Taking a quick gander at our relative humidity. Definitely some dry air associated in the Gulf, at least for early on. And then as the system does start to develop, it does infuse into that moisture pocket over here. And then as it starts to move into from the Caribbean into the Gulf, yeah, there's definitely going to be some dry air that does entrain in it initially. But this is mixable dry air, as I like to say. And what I mean by mixable dry air is it's not dry air that's going to entrain and potentially kill off the system. It's dry air that, yes, is going to be annoying, but it looks to me, and based on the European run, that as long as there's consistent convection that's firing and mixing that dry air out, then it should have no problems getting its act together as long as that shear stays in that main area. So that's definitely something that we're paying attention to. And that dry air mainly persists, I will say. That's probably your one thing that might be inhibiting it early on, but later on it definitely becomes less of an issue as long as that convection continues to produce and as long as that dry air continues to mix out. Those are going to be they are going to cause some problems initially, but at least the relative humidity, based on what I'm seeing, doesn't get below 40% based on the estimates I'm looking at based on the charts. So overall, yes, it's not the most ideal situation, but it is a situation that we can watch and we can go, okay, as long as this continues to pump out convection and as long as it continues to battle that shear, that dry air, it should be in okay shape, at least in the long run. So that's kind of what we're watching, and it is definitely something that we need to watch for too, because that could potentially make or break how the system's going to act. So that's what we have for the European. Let's go ahead and take a look at the GFS as well, the GFS operational for sure too. Give it a second to load up. Here's their GFS system right here. Here's our 0Z for you guys right here. 0Z GFS has been kind of interesting, mainly a bit further to the east compared to the European, I've noticed. As I continue to look at this, let's go ahead and skip this back to right here. It's going to take a second to load, but here's what we got for the GFS. Mainly you having the system emerging off the Caribbean over here in off the coast of Honduras and Belize, and then starting to slowly get its act together. And just kind of, I will say though, the 0Z GFS definitely is kind of all over the place. I'm noticing kind of just, emerges over here. Then you start seeing this start to pop up as it heads towards Florida. Yeah, the 0Z GFS isn't really showing too much right here, and it's kind of all over the place with the way things are going. So I'll just take a look at the 12Z real quickly just to kind of skip through it and save some time. 12Z GFS is interesting as the EPAC, this system right here, GFS wants this to blow up into a potential hurricane as it approaches El Salvador. I don't know how realistic that's going to be, but by and large, you do have something potentially emerging here in the Gulf as well, and then potentially heading towards Louisiana. But I'm not sure where exactly that vorticity is coming from. I'm not sure if it's a vorticity bias or not from the GFS. If something is going to develop, it's mainly going to be due to carryover effect from the East Pacific as the Europeans forecasting. The GFS is kind of all over the place, not just with the ensembles, but also with the operational as well. And we'll go ahead and take a look at a couple other models as well. Here's what our Canadian is forecasting for as well. Canadian's not showing too much, although the ensembles are starting to show something. So maybe the operational run is going to need to catch up to the ensembles at some point. That's definitely a possibility with that as well. So for the Canadian, in order for that to get its act together, the operational run is probably going to need to catch up to the ensembles that we showed earlier. Lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at the Icon. Icon only goes 7.5 days out, and we'll go ahead and show the 12Z as well. Icon is definitely kind of interesting as well. Let's go ahead and pull this further along the timeline. And then as we get to about 144 hours out, that's 6 days, ultimately what you're noticing is maybe a little bit of something happening in the Gulf, but it's too early to determine at this current point in time. So overall, support is continuing to increase, at least in the European and in the GFS ensembles. The operational runs definitely need to catch up a little bit before things get a bit more conclusive, but we will close the video out right here, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.